All right, now we'll take a look at how you might work with an adjustment layer that includes a layer mask. So if you worked all the way through Chapter 2, you may recall that I recommended that you turn off automatic layer masks for adjustment layers. And just by way of a reminder, I'll go up to the window menu and choose the adjustments command. And then notice if I click on the flyout menu icon in the top right corner, there's this option right here, Add Mask by Default, which is turned on by default, by the way. In which case, if I were to click on the image layer down here at the bottom of the layers panel, and I were to add a new brightness contrast layer just by clicking on this first icon in the adjustments panel, then I would end up with the default layer mask right here. And notice that it's white, which means it's not doing anything. We're just correcting the entire image. So the only reason the layer mask exists is in case I want to paint away some of the adjustment. And just to make this perfectly clear, I'll reduce the heck out of the brightness value. And you can see now that I'm affecting the entire image. Notice that the layer mask is active, in which case I could go ahead and grab my brush tool, which I can get by pressing the B key. I could right-click somewhere inside the image window, and I'll just randomly crank up the size value to something huge so we can really see what's going on. I'll crank up the hardness value as well, and then press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to dismiss that panel. And now notice that my foreground color is white. That's not going to do me any good. The layer mask, after all, is already white. And so instead, I'm going to swap those two colors by clicking on this little switch icon, which has a keyboard shortcut of X. And that way I'm painting with black. And now notice I can paint the adjustment away. Well, that's fine, but given how often I do that, it's not really worth always having a layer mask associated with the adjustment layer. So let me show you my preferred way of working. I'll go ahead and press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of that adjustment layer. And then I'll return to the adjustments panel right here, and I'll click on that flyout menu icon again, and I'll choose Add Mask by Default to turn it off. In which case, from now on, anytime I create a new adjustment layer, it will not include a layer mask. And so notice if I just click on that icon right there for a brightness contrast layer, we get the layer without a layer mask. If ever I want to add a layer mask, all I have to do is click on this Add Layer Mask icon down here at the bottom of the Layers panel. That's not really what I want to do either. I want to convert a selection outline to a layer mask on the fly. So I'll go ahead and press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to get rid of that new layer. And what I'm going to do is select the background, or at least the area around the sign. And I'll do so by clicking and holding on the Object Selection tool and grabbing the Quick Selection tool right here, which is actually an automated selection brush. Now, we probably need a bigger brush, so I'm going to click up here in the Options bar in order to bring up my size value, and I'll just crank it up to 100. Should do. And then I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to accept that change. And I'll brush all the way around the sign until I select all of the wall, like so. All right, now if I switch back to the Adjustments panel, and I want to name this layer as I create it, so I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on that first icon in the first row. That'll bring up the new layer dialog box, and I'll just go ahead and call this guy background or something like that, and click OK. And now notice that Photoshop automatically converts the selection into a layer mask, at which point I could go ahead and take the brightness value down in order to dim the background while leaving the sign nice and bright. And then if you zoom in, as I'll do right now, and you find out that you have some choppy edges, might actually look fine, but if you want to soften your layer mask a little bit, then go ahead and click on this icon, the second icon up here in the Properties panel for the mask, and that will bring up your feather value, at which point you could go ahead and add some blur by increasing that value. And this is a dynamic value, by the way, so you can change your mind anytime you like, just by coming back to the Properties panel and once again clicking on the masks icon. And so those are a few different ways to take advantage of layer masks when working with adjustment layers here inside Photoshop.